The major problem of each of these disciplines is to bring the student to the point from which he can really begin. Herrigel spent almost 5 years trying to find the right way of releasing the bowstring, for it had to be done unintentionally, in the same way as a ripe fruit bursts its skin. His problem was to resolve the paradox of practicing relentlessly without ever trying, and to let go of the taut string intentionally without intention. His master, at one and the same time, urged him to keep on working and working, but also to stop making an effort. For the art cannot be learned unless the arrow shoots itself, unless the string is released, wu xin and wu nian, without mind and without thought. The same is true in learning to use the brush for writing or painting. The brush must draw by itself. This cannot happen if one does not practice constantly, but neither can it happen if one makes an effort. Similarly, in swordsmanship, one must not first decide upon a certain thrust and then attempt to make it, since by that time it will be too late. Decision and action must be simultaneous. This was the point of Dogen's image of firewood and ashes. For to say that firewood does not become ashes is to say that it has no intention to be ash before it is actually ash, and then it is no longer firewood. Dogen insisted that the two states were clearly cut, and in the same way Herrigel's master did not want him to mix the two states of stretching and releasing the bow. He instructed him to draw it to the point of fullest tension and stop there without any purpose, any intention in mind as to what to do next. Likewise, in Dogen's view of Zazen, one must be sitting just to sit, and there must not be any intention to have satori. The sudden visions of nature which form the substance of haiku arise in the same way, for they are never there when one looks for them. The artificial haiku always feels like a piece of life which has been deliberately broken off or wrenched away from the universe, whereas the genuine haiku has dropped off all by itself and has the whole universe inside it. Because Zen does not involve an ultimate dualism between the controller and the controlled, the mind and the body, the spiritual and the material, there is always a certain physiological aspect to its techniques. Whether Zen is practiced through Zazen or Cha-no-yu or Kendo, great importance is attached to the way of breathing. Not only is breathing one of the two fundamental rhythms of the body, it is also the process in which control and spontaneity, voluntary and involuntary action, find their most obvious identity. So-called normal breathing is fitful and anxious. The air is always being held and not fully released, for the individual seems incapable of letting it run its full course through the lungs. He breathes compulsively rather than freely. The technique, therefore, begins by encouraging a full release of the breath, easing it out, as if the body were being emptied of air by a great leaden ball sinking through the chest and abdomen and settling down into the ground. The returning in-breath is then allowed to follow as a simple reflex action. The air is not actively inhaled. It is just allowed to come, and then, when the lungs are comfortably filled, it is allowed to go out once more. The image of the leaden ball giving it the sense of falling out as distinct from being pushed out. But just as there is no need to try to be in accord with the Tao, to try to see, or to try to hear, so it must be remembered that the breath will always take care of itself. This is not a breathing exercise so much as a watching and letting of the breath, and it is always a serious mistake to undertake it in the spirit of a compulsive discipline to be practiced with a goal in mind. This way of breathing is not for special times alone. Like Zen itself, it is for all circumstances whatsoever, and in this way every human activity can become a form of Zazen. In its own way, each one of the arts which Zen has inspired gives vivid expression to the sudden or instantaneous quality of its view of the world. The momentariness of Sumi paintings and haiku, and the total presence of mind required in Cha-no-yu and Kendo, bring out the real reason why Zen has always called itself the way of instantaneous awakening. It is not just that satori comes quickly and unexpectedly, all of a sudden, for mere speed has nothing to do with it. The reason is that Zen is a liberation from time. For if we open our eyes and see clearly, it becomes obvious that there is no other time than this instant, and that the past and the future are abstractions without any concrete reality. Until this has become clear, it seems that our life is all past and future, and that the present is nothing more than the infinitesimal hairline which divides them. From this comes the sensation of having no time, of a world which hurries by so rapidly that it is gone before we can enjoy it. But through awakening to the instant, one sees that this is the reverse of the truth. It is rather the past and future which are the fleeting illusions, and the present which is eternally real. Western thought has changed so rapidly in this century that we are in a state of considerable confusion. Familiar concepts of space, time, and motion, of nature and natural law, of history and social change, of human personality itself, have dissolved, and we find ourselves adrift without landmarks in a universe which more and more resembles the Buddhist principle of the Great Void. The various wisdoms of the West, religious, philosophical, and scientific, do not offer much guidance to the art of living in such a universe, and we find the prospects of making our way in so trackless an ocean of relativity rather frightening. For we are used to absolutes, to firm principles and laws to which we can cling for spiritual and psychological security. That may be why there is so much interest in a culturally productive way of life, which, for some 1,500 years, has felt thoroughly at home in the void, and which not only feels no terror for it, but rather a positive delight. To use its own words, the situation of Zen has always been, above, not a tile to cover the head, below, not an inch of ground for the foot. But the scientifically trained Westerner is a cautious and skeptical fellow who likes to know what he is getting into. This does not advocate importing Zen from the Far East, for there it has become deeply involved with cultural institutions which are quite foreign to us. But there is no doubt that there are things which we can learn or unlearn from Zen and apply in our own way. Historically, Zen may be regarded as the fulfillment of long traditions of Indian and Chinese culture, though it is actually much more Chinese than Indian, and, since the 12th century, it has rooted itself deeply and most creatively in the culture of Japan. It is not a religion or philosophy. It is not a psychology or a type of science. It is rather an example of what is known in India and China as a way of liberation, and is as much Taoist as Buddhist.
Zen is a translation of the Sanskrit word jhana, pronounced Chan in Chinese and Zen in Japanese. It is unfortunately untranslatable in English. It designates a certain state of consciousness that is sometimes called meditation, but that won't do it all. Contemplation isn't really the point. And sometimes one-pointedness of mind. I would prefer to translate this word with the notion of total presence of mind. When we say a person is crazy, we often say they're not all there. Now go to the opposite of that and visualize a person who is completely there, or who is completely here. A person who lives totally and absolutely now. That doesn't mean he's incapable of thinking about the past or the future, because thoughts about the past and about the future are included in the present. You have them now. But imagine the kind of person who is not distracted, who when he talks to you, it really gives you his whole being. The Tao is a way of life. The word Tao means the way, the course of nature, the flow of things. And in order to understand this point of view, we have to make a very, very radical adjustment in our ordinary common sense. Because Zen and Taoism in common involve not a system of doctrine, not a set of beliefs as we ordinarily understand religion. They involve a transformation of your consciousness. That is to say, of the way in which you experience your own existence at every moment. One might say that the average individual, not only in the West but also in the East, has a feeling of himself as separate from his surroundings, from other people, and from the earth itself, and from the space and the stars and everything around the earth. He feels this in such a way that it's expressed in all the phrases of common speech. We talk about coming into the world. I came into this world. As a matter of fact, you didn't. You came out of it. Just in the same way as an apple comes out of an apple tree, as an expression of the apple tree. The world that we live in and we experience is not cut up into things and events. It all goes together in the same way that the bees and the flowers go together, only we don't notice this. We've got a way of thinking which splits it all up, and as a result of that, we think of ourselves, and so feel ourselves, as if we were something separate from the whole domain of nature. And to make a long story short, and to tell you the whole point right at the beginning, the disciplines of Taoism and of Zen propose to change your consciousness in such a way that you will no longer feel that you are an isolated unit locked up inside a bag of skin, but that you will actually experience the fact that your real self, the real you, is everything that there is, but concentrated and expressing itself at the point called your physical organism. We as individual organisms, as what we call physical bodies, we come and go like leaves on a tree, but there's the tree. And you are the tree. In the saying of Jesus, I am the vine, you are the branches. But that I am, before Abraham was I am, is the self, and is what the Hindus call the Brahman, and the Chinese call the Tao.